I'm Saad Ghosn,
I'm Vaishnavi Ramanathan.
and we are the co-curators of this retrospective of SOS Art. I am also the founder and the president of SOS Art, which is a non-profit organization which has for mission to promote the arts, all kinds of arts, provide opportunities for the arts, and encourage the artists for peace and justice. And we try to give the voice to all local artists to express what's important to them. We included in this particular exhibit a whole series of activities which are geared for young artists to ask them to respond to the messages who are here so they could really make the message a little bit their own, learn a little bit about it, and we're asking them to respond with their own art and their own statement.
This SOS Retrospective is a collection of artworks from the last 5 annual exhibitions of SOS Art. Saad and I went through the last 5 years, artworks that were part of the last 5 years, and each of us came up with a certain set of artworks that interested us most, and then we discussed and had a dialogue and then arrived at a selection of artworks. There were many more artworks that were extremely interesting and strong, but unfortunately we could not include them. We have about 90 artists who are part of the exhibition and over 100 artworks. And what's also very unique about this exhibition is, apart from a physical display of artworks, we also have an outdoor exhibition, an outdoor display, so that people who are passing by can view the exhibition.
This is my piece, COVID-19. It kind of started as a joke. Me and my friend were sitting and talking. This is back in March when everything kind of started, and we just kind of said, like, man, this COVID really has the world by the... And I just stopped at world. It all started with like a conquistador, and then eventually kind of made its way to like an old horror movie villain. I've spent most of my years trying to just master technique. This is the first kind of opportunity where I ever got to really be prompted or someone ask me my thoughts. So being able to actually put some thought into it as far as like a bigger picture or a bigger message has been really, really cool and really inspiring. And that's why I really like the show.
This painting is about my own experience with depression and anxiety and how those feelings can be so overwhelming and chaotic that you get lost in them. In my work, I tend to use interior spaces that I live in, and I then transform those through abstraction so that they're not literal depictions of the space. I'm more interested in expression than describing the spaces. This particular painting was done quite a few years ago, and I was living in an apartment by myself, so it's kind of like a self-portrait.
This is my piece. It's called Pockets, and it was done during a period where my family was moving out of the house and starting their own families. And the pockets here, to me, were representing a process where you're building, nesting, changing, and it was just a way of expressing that emotion at that time. I just realized early on that I like to draw, had art lessons, and just kept at it. I never dreamed back then that I would still be interested in art. I don't know what I'd do without it.
This piece is part of a series or a body of work that were 12 pieces, and they were kind of like a reaction to what has been happening in our country for the last 4 years, or maybe longer. It's there's a sense of conflict or internal struggle. So a lot of these pieces will have like two primary forces or figures that are at odds with each other, creating tension and struggle. My own work derives from a lot of anxiety. So a lot of my work is people would consider creepy, but it's more manifestation of like internal anxieties or fears.
My name's Laurie Altman, and this ofrenda is actually about my nephew Liam. I call it L is for a Life Lived with Love. Unfortunately, Liam suicided when he was 15. I wrote him a note, and there was kind of a miracle that happened, and so this piece is an expression of explaining that miracle, because this picture showed up on my phone, and it showed up a couple different times when I was crying about him to comfort me, and it's a heart that was made at a makerspace and a picture of him. I hope that it encourages people to talk, because so many people deal with depression and suicide, and I just want people to focus on love.
My name is Mario Barbi. After a very long career in advertising, in 2017 I graduated at NKU with a BFA in drawing. Since then I always take classes, art classes. All disciplines that are available, I'm bound to experiment them. Hunting the Whale, that's this piece, is the result of one of the studies after the graduation. So I took one class in printmaking, and one of the disciplines was linocut. It's something I've never done before, and I enjoyed very much doing it. This was part of a larger study that I was conducting on Moby Dick. It's a demonstration of daring of the man and the danger that the ecosystem is running.
My name is Jimmy Bogle, and the title of my piece is Allah Bless America. Everyone's seen that painting, The American Gothic. There's photographer Gordon Parks, who did a piece that was a quote from that called The New American Gothic. And it was that Gordon Parks image that inspired me to create that series of images, from which this comes from, is a part of. Speaks to the limitations imposed upon women in America, especially women of color. I create art because I have to. For me, it's like breathing.
My name is Julie Broxick. My piece is Stop the Madness. I created it last year during the impeachment trials, and who knew we would be doing another one here a year later. We are living in crazy times, and I think we all, and this was before the pandemic that I began doing this, and I think we would all like to step back and be in a more sane space. I create art because it's the only thing I know how to do. I've always created art. Most of my art has to do with my cat rescue. I do a lot of pen and ink work. I also create collages from adhesive vinyl, and I paint rocks. I paint rocks that look like cats.
My name's Jeff Casto, and this is my piece, Devils and Dinosaurs. It was inspired by my childhood. Growing up, religion played a large part of my life. I grew up in rural West Virginia, and there were a lot of misconceptions about science. And one of the misconceptions were dinosaurs were the work of the devil, put into the ground to test our faith. This may not seem like an environmental piece. For me, it is, and somewhat because it addresses a sort of anti-science movement. One of the things I like about science is it's always proposed as a theory. There's a humbleness in science.
My name is Jan Brown-Checo, and these two paintings are called Wanda and Gus, formerly of the West End. My reason for painting these two portraits of individuals who are typical of those families that are displaced by massive developments in our urban core is to render awareness of what it's like to suddenly have no home because someone else wants your land. Gus, who needs special services to learn how to read and also how to handle simple math, no longer can have access to those centers for services. And Wanda just is going to miss her next door neighbor who was a support for her, and they would meet regularly for coffee.
This is my work called Rebel. The inspiration came at first directly from a poem by Dr. Tyrone Williams. He's a colleague at Xavier. He says, stemming from roots, branching out beyond limb edge, fingers coiled into fists against a blonde sky. What I took from it was this idea of Mother Earth and these fists coming out of the ground with these roots, protesting, if you will, against the assaults that are happening to her and just against assaulters in general, rapists, sexists, bigots, racists. I wanted the roots to spell the word rebel. We do have to rebel against injustices. We do have to take action. I believe that art matters and that we can make a difference because of the work we make.
My piece goes back to 2017. I think it's titled That Face in the Crowd. It was inspired by our present political system. It's a piggyback from a movie going back to the 1950s entitled A Face in the Crowd. It's a cautionary tale that says celebrity mixed with politics can be a very dangerous combination. Political cartooning has a place in society to teach and to make people think, and I think that's important. I do watercolors, I do painting, I do illustration, I do cartooning, I do creative writing, all of which want to have a provocative and storytelling nature too.
This particular piece is called the Transformation Mask. I got into working with Native American pieces because of the genocide of the Native Americans. And the transformation masks that are made by the Native Americans in the Northwest of the United States opened up, and they would use it during sacred ceremonies. And during the ceremony, at a certain point, they would pull these strings and another face would open up. And that face would be another more sacred form. Because of the genocide and the taking away of the culture of Native Americans, this particular mask opens up to a Native American who has lost their culture. I enjoy so much making functional pieces like teapots and vases. But through my sculptural work, I can communicate my feelings about what's going on in the world, the injustices that are happening. This piece is called Water is Life, and it was my outrage over the Standing Rock pipeline that they put in at North Dakota. I did a lot of research into the pipeline itself and faces of Lakota peoples. So I have at the bottom of the piece a family of Lakota people, and then the pipeline is the rim at the top, and it's leaking, obviously. Since the about 3 years that the pipeline was put through, I've lost count how many times it's leaked into the groundwater.
My name's Jim Conroy. This is the Gray Man and Outside of Eden. I painted the Gray Man because I was at 5th Street Gallery at the Millennium, and I saw a homeless man sitting outside of Saks, and I saw this couple walk by him and just completely ignore him with their noses up. I painted Outside of Eden small because I wanted you to get up and intimate with it instead of just walking by like they did. People find themselves homeless for a variety of reasons. They're human beings and have inherent beauty just as being human beings as well. They're not just another piece of the cityscape. I'm a self-taught artist. I started painting about 5 years ago. I like to paint things that people don't normally see as being beautiful.
This piece is about the pink tax, which is products marketed for women costing an average of 7% more than products marketed toward men. Even things like pink bicycles for girls cost more, pink shavers, even though they're identical to men's shavers. With personal care products, it's more like 13%. And they know that, well, things that women have to buy, they don't have a choice about. They can charge whatever they want to. I think ever since I was very small, I've made art, and I guess I tried to work things out and solve problems with my art. It's just part of me.
This is my piece called The End of Innocence. This piece has to do with colonialism and one culture subjugating another culture, which has gone on forever and ever. But in this case, I had been looking through a book of costumes. It was an old book, and it had a picture of this little girl in the Philippines, and she was wearing like a banana leaf skirt. I just started thinking about what it must have been like for a little girl like that. You know, the missionaries come and tell you you have to do this, and you can't speak your language, and you have to wear this. And over time, those whole cultures are just gone.
I'm Scott Donaldson, and I've been a painter in Cincinnati for since 2000, thereabouts. I came here to work at the Freedom Center, but I ended up doing murals for Artworks for many years. And I've always had a keen interest in painting. I've been painting since I was in first grade. And we took a trip out west on a train and went to Yellowstone, and there we saw the buffalo. The inspiration actually comes from a hotel just outside of Yellowstone, and there was a big stuffed buffalo head on the wall. That's it. And this is also about the disappearance of the buffalo and of the environment.
This is my piece, School Shootings, that I did a couple years ago while I was still in high school. School shootings are very personal to me, specifically just because I am a student. My younger family members are students too. My parents are teachers. A lot of my aunts and uncles are teachers. So, you know, we're all spending a lot of time in school buildings, which are kind of hot zones for a lot of gun violence. I wanted to create a piece about that because fortunately, I've never experienced a school shooting, but we spent so much time in school doing drills and going over scenarios. So the hands are trying to like get out and escape, but they're trapped in this school desk, and that kind of represents like the fear and chaos sort of surrounding school right now.
My piece is called The Things We Steal, and it is acrylic paint on an archival map. I was inspired to create this piece after going to Standing Rock in 2016 and organizing with Indigenous people for Indigenous sovereignty. The purpose is to educate white people and other colonizers on the reality of land that was stolen from Indigenous people through the creation of the United States. Artists have to say the things that are important in creative ways. We have to advocate for people that may not have a voice. We have to carve out spaces for issues so that we can create a better world.
My name is Saad Ghosn, and I am a self-taught artist and a retired physician. The piece I've done was triggered by my retirement. When I retired, I started really questioning my life, and I kind of was facing with a little bit death in a way, thinking about it and how I can contribute more to my life. It's me and me here, and then it's me and death, kind of in a conversation. I am here dressed like a robe, which kind of like represents the Socratic wisdom in a way. The time is stopped. And my question is, what is our role in this world? My art has been, from the beginning, very much as my voice for things that are important to me. Not only I convey what I see, but also I convey what I would like to be. And that has been really the message of my work, and also the work that I do through SOS Art that I have founded 18 years ago.
I'm Vince Gray, and this painting is called Bullies. There's so much bullying going around, and it's been around forever. It's going to be around forever. So I figured I'd just let people see that the hurt, the pain that one goes through when they deal with bullying. I'm a pointillism artist. My paintings are so hard to do. It takes me about maybe 3 weeks just to do one painting. In high school, we had to study famous artists, and I said, who is Sarad? And I took his style and turned it to mine. It's a little different. I do it more like an overlapping. And I figured that if I do it right one day, it'll start doing something. It's finally starting to do something a little bit. So I want to be different. I'm always different. So I want to, when you walk in the room, that's Vince Gray's work. I create art just because I enjoy it, and for people to enjoy it, what comes out my head.
The name of my piece is The Price Avondale Pays. And Avondale has two large entities, Children's Hospitals, the Cincinnati Zoo. Anytime they need to expand, they take houses in Avondale. I did a series of photographs on a day that I believe they tore down about 16 houses. As a young person, a kid, my dad and I lived in the West End. All of those houses were torn down so they could put I-75 through. That's when we moved to Avondale. And while I was in the Air Force, the building that we lived in was torn down. The schools that I attended have all been torn down. There is nothing of my youth left in Cincinnati. And it's not to condemn that the projects that they're doing are bad, but we pay the price for photojournalists. So I do it working for the newspaper because it was my job, but I also do it because I love it.
The name of my piece is Prayer Hands, and it's from a larger body of work called Hand Mandalas. After the election in 2016 and the Women's March was announced, many of us in Cincinnati participated. After that, there was just this huge feeling of, what are we gonna do next? As a photographer, I realized that I could bring people together and make symbols of peace and unity. And so I called on friends and acquaintances of those friends until we found enough people that represented different religions from around the world and different skin colors. When they came in, most of them didn't know each other, but when they left, many were friends. They found out they were neighbors. It felt very healing to do the piece for everybody involved. I think it's important for artists to sort of use imagery to say what their intent is. That's an important part of what we're here on earth to do.
I have two pieces in the exhibition, Agua de Beber and State Line. State Line is an installation in 3 parts. It's a memorial to African American men, women, and children who were killed by police in the first part of the 21st century. I created the State Line piece after the death of Samuel DuBose in Cincinnati. Part of the exhibition is I Line, Line Up, and the central peace sign is titled Police State. On it are the faces of the victims of police shootings and their names written across the composition. Eye line are the eyes of the victims and they're laying across the floor. This is somewhat of a cosmograph. So this is represents a passage between living and dying. And I also make a lot of references in graffiti in my work and reference to the broken windows policing policy, which is a policy that led to stop and frisk and ultimately the death of Eric Garner in New York. Graffiti eradication was one of the first targets of broken windows policing. I also use the colors yellow and black in this because in the animal kingdom, yellow and black are warning signs. Agua de Beber reflects on the water crisis in Flint, Michigan. Superimposed on the image are the lyrics from a Brazilian love song, Agua de Beber, water to drink. In both pieces, there's a sense of language being obliterated. I create artwork to explore and to express, to explore ideas and leave a visual record of that exploration.
My name is Ted Hendricks. Looking at the sky is a peaceful endeavor, I think. And human interaction on Earth is where rules and justice come about. And the stuff in front is lawn furniture, kind of white and translucent, maybe a ghost of a party. And the sky is striated and it's obvious that some kind of disturbance is happening. It came out of a feeling that something was coming, type of impending doom. I'm basically a painter. I've been doing it since I was 6 or 7. It gives me some other time, to get out of my head.
This is my piece called Don't Go Back to Sleep. This piece is inspired by a Rumi poem. The outside of this whole piece is Pusenki eggs that each egg I wrote with the verses of this Rumi poem. This is really about the abuse of children. When I was young, I had issues with abuse. And my way out was that I dreamed and actually thought was real for most of my young life, that a bird flew through a window when something bad was happening, and I flew out the window on the bird. And that was how I could save myself. And this is my homage to those children who are able to make it out on whatever way they can manage.
My name is Devin Horton, and this is my piece, Offer. The piece comes from my newest series, Penchant, which is about our society's obsession with consumption and waste. And this piece specifically is about how we continuously take away from our Earth's natural resources without replenishing them. This piece, Offer, is a temple of false material fulfillment that blocks out what could have been a beautiful landscape. I create art to fight for what I believe in, and I believe that climate change is the #1 issue facing my generation. With these pieces, I hope that we can bring awareness to an issue that I feel like no one is talking about. And I hope to alter an individual's relationship with trash. I hope that this series inspires a big change.
The pieces are of the Ruble Baking Company, which is no longer. To me, it's more like trying to hold on to something before it disappears forever. And it kind of celebrates them, at least the top, as the building they were when they were built. All the craftsmanship and design details and things that are missing today. So I just wanted to capture those. And then the bottom one kind of shows what's left after they destroyed it, because it was demolished to make way for a new building. So there's not much you can do to stop that, but you might as well celebrate what was there.
My piece is called The Warriors. I made this piece to try to clarify Colin Kaepernick's message. Why did he kneel on one knee? And why didn't he stand? Some people have misconstrued this message as a disrespect for the flag, but it's not disrespect. It's just trying to get respect for African American people. I made them as sculptured pieces, not on the football field, but inside of a museum, where people in the future will be able to see it, and some people won't like it. The rug here is a rug about the Maasai, an African tribe that never got conquered. So I put that in there to say they never got defeated. The world outside my studio is in such turmoil. I do art in order to bring some semblance of order to the world that I live in.
My name is Larry Jones, and I have 5 pieces in the show. I've been photographing street art for about 20 years. I've always been drawn to street art. It's mostly liberal, left-wing, radical, revolutionary, which I tend to relate to. I also like to shoot people in events. This one was taken at an event during Pride weekend in San Francisco. Well, photography, it gives me a reason to get out there. If I don't have anything to do, I can pick up my camera and look for unusual things, signs, people, whatever happens to present itself. I think the photos speak pretty much for themselves.
I've been an art professor and a ceramic artist for almost 4 decades. As a ceramic artist, most of us probably started as potters, but I slowly over the years segued into sculpture and in the bas-relief in particular. As an Armenian woman, my work would always allude to my culture in a very subtle way. But 2015 marked the 100th anniversary of the Armenian genocide. 1.5 million people were just systematically murdered for nothing more than ethnic cleansing. To this day, Turkey has denied this genocide. This is where Hitler got his inspiration from. He is quoted as saying, "Look what the Turks did to the Armenians," and who speaks of that today? Art making is essential for me. My studio is my sanctuary.
This is my piece entitled Matthew and Jacob. It became clear in the year before this photograph was taken that Matthew and Jacob, who were identical twins, were struggling from a psychological point of view. Their condition became worse and worse. We took them to a lot of doctors who could not give us a diagnosis. I wanted to be able to spend some time with them before whatever was going to happen. So I took them and their older brother on a train trip around the country, and this photograph was taken at Glacier National Park during that time. I believe it's important in both to use that art for social betterment. To that end, I spend a lot of time, all of us in our family do, lecturing about mental health and specifically about schizophrenia.
I'm Susan Kemp,
And this is Georgia. I belong to a group called the Best Friends in Utah, and animal rescue is one of the tops in the nation. Many of you will remember when Michael Vick was accused of abusing and abused a number of dogs and used them in fighting. Georgia is one of those dogs. Best Friends moved in, rescued the dogs. Georgia was one of the lucky ones. She found a home and she lived her last days in relatively peace. The lady who adopted her said, you know, it certainly didn't change the world, but it did change the world for one dog. So if we can just keep remembering the things we do are important. I create art to communicate, to try and get people to think about the importance of our relationships with the animals on our planet. There's other messages within messages. So hopefully someone who takes the time to look at it can sort through and perhaps find something that's important to them.
I'm Jake Chrismanic, a local painter and cartoonist, and this is my piece, Fake News. I was inspired to create it after the inauguration of Trump. I was trying to figure out a way to not hate him, and the best I could come up with was sarcasm, which has slowly become more sincere. I create art. I'm trying to express myself, and just it's meditation and masturbation. It's recording myself and my feelings, and just putting ideas out into the world.
Piece here is called The First Supper. Just something inside me just said, hey, you know, put this over here, put this there, and do the first supper. You know, I said, like, I was asking myself, what is the first supper? You know, the piece deals with a celebration, celebrating the coming of the new chef, the new paradigm. All of these are participating in the party. It was like the apostles. On the table, they have their implements of transformation. Underneath the table here is kind of the old dispensation. My work in general is very improvisational. I'm also a musician, and I love jazz, but I love being free.
This is my piece, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. George Blake wrote a poem, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, and he's always been one of my favorite authors. Main character here, a friend of mine, an artist and a sculptor and an art professor. The design here is actually very Renaissance. They get a concept of the golden mean. The center of the piece that was diagonal, it was like a triangle basically. I designed this to be like a stained glass window. It has kind of a kaleidoscopic type view. I've always created art. I came from a family of artists. I've been a lawyer for, I don't know, 43, 44 years, something like that. And now I'm moving into semi-retirement, into retirement, so I'm doing more and more work.
I'm a lifelong fine artist, and I met Saad, 20 years ago, started doing the SOS shows, and of course we had a lot of think tanks, and during one of the think tanks I remember all the shrines I see around the city of people who died, usually by violence, so I would find out who these people were, and then I would talk to the family and get a photograph and use it to make an image that would be put into like a metal realtor frame at the site where he fell, or they fell. I got a request from Jordan Ware's friends to do this portrait, and I just installed it on Forest and Irving. It may not really change the situation we're in, but it's hard to tell the residual effect. I made a little machine that painted out of Legos, and the machine needed a simple stroke, and then I just adapted it for my own manner.
This is my sculpture called DM Me. This piece was ironically started during a kid's ceramics class, just like the head part of it. And I really wanted to add a body, but I kind of was struggling for a little bit to capture what sort of body this facial expression would have, and I was taken back to experiences a lot of women have had, just with men setting them unwarranted and unsolicited pictures over the internet. And so I thought it would be a good opportunity to make a commentary on that sort of experience. Just kind of like build as I go and come up with concept and meaning like as I make it or afterwards, which I think is a really healthy way to make art.
The piece is called Palmyra. It is a Syrian ruin. It's Greco-Roman. It is 1,800 years old. ISIS took it upon itself to destroy this in October 2015. This no longer exists as you see it in the painting. The central arch is on the ground. The two arches on either side still remain. I started drawing when I was 7. I got my first lessons, professional lessons at 14. Won some awards in high school, thanks to great teachers. Went on into ceramics and printmaking afterwards in college, and then settled on painting. Create because I'm obsessed with it. It's a habit. It never goes away once it's kicked in.
The name of my piece is It's About Time. I wanted to school our young generation about Emmett Till, Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown. They are the modern day Emmett Tills. And then I wanted to introduce them to Nat Turner. I wanted them to learn about the Willie Lynch letters. I really wanted them to do that. And when they came back, and we had some really, really wonderful dialogue, and they're learning so much, and then they're teaching me something too. They have fire in their bellies, and I'm proud of that. I do social justice subjects a lot because my mother used to make us read the entire newspaper. Before I could do the comics and all, I had to read the whole paper. I chose to go to the military and serve my country. I didn't do art school, and I'm kind of proud of that now. I create art. It's a wonderful outlet for me. I have PTSD, so my art is my voice.
Kyle and I were really interested in how we can contribute to kind of that whole notion of what civil rights means to people. It goes back to what most people think about civil rights in the 1960s, the freedom marches and things like that. But what's happened then still is happening now. Thinking about the Black Lives Matter movement, it became our generation, our version of what happened within the 1960s, 1950s of civil rights. Just reliving the same things that my mom and dad had went through, and bringing it into a kind of a more modern context. And unfortunately, we're still dealing with these really important issues to this day.
My piece is a mixed media drawing entitled 10/01/2017. The piece was inspired by the Las Vegas massacre that happened on the same date, as well as the many other instances of political violence that have happened in the intervening years. I create art for many reasons, but one important reason is that the freedom to express one's ideas is sacrosanct, and my practice of that sacred right manifests itself visually.
My piece is called Dandelions and Thistles. The idea is who decides what plants are flowers and which are weeds, and what people are worthy and who deserves to live in a creeping shadow of fear. I have no recollection of a time in my life when I didn't do art. I grew up without a TV in a small town. I think it's more that I have a lot in my head, and in a piece of art there can be a lot of things going on at the same time. And someone who speaks a language that might be different from yours can also understand or discover different things in it than maybe even I might see.
So I was inspired to create this piece after the school shootings at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, particularly because of the impact that I feel like it has on the daily lives of my students. Schools should be a safe harbor, and unfortunately it seems like that's not the case, nor has it been the case. So I was inspired to research the incidents of gun-related violence in schools in America, which went all the way back to 1764, which was the first documented school shooting. My thought with this piece was to try to raise the issues and the seriousness of this epidemic of violence to the forefront of people's minds. A lot of my work is very autobiographical, so it tends to deal with issues of identity and also societal issues and how I perceive the societal issues.
The piece that has been selected for this show is called Boo, or What Scares You. And it started because I found a piece of wood that has been used for the first cover. It looked like a ghost to me, and I had that in my studio for a number of years, until around 2016, when I started hearing people, friends, colleagues, talk about they were scared. They were scared about different things that were going on in the country. And that's how this piece came to be. I started as strictly a book artist, doing blank handmade books. There's an unfolding and a revealing of the message, and you're not asked to take it in all at once.
In 2014, I began kind of keeping track of the religious persecution that was happening at the hands of the Islamic State, also known as ISIS. I saw this image of 21 Christian men who were executed. They were beheaded in Libya. I also was praying that the then head of the Islamic State, al-Baghdadi, would actually come to his senses and repent. This is my prayer for that. It's also a prayer for all of those who were grieving the loss of their family members. Ever since I was a tiny child, I've been drawing. I'm following my creator when I make art.
This piece is an extension of my Borderland Migration series. This piece shows how denying of one group of people their social opportunities leads to a social acceptance of denying other groups of people their social opportunities. You reference Over the Rhine, and this is Ravine Street, and that street travels up to University of Cincinnati. And so by blocking it off with a barbed wire, this is a representation of the restriction of freedom. My art is, I call it social political landscapes. They may not even start out social or political, they just sort of turn into that because I have a lot to say.
This is my piece, Almost There. A lot of current events in the past 5 years have really brought my attention to police brutality. Growing up, I was very sheltered. I didn't understand as a child that some of my friends had to have talks with their parents about how to act around police officers. So the main character in this painting is Tiana from The Princess and the Frog, and she's protesting the unjust murder of her frog prince, Naveen. I just wanted to kind of point out different things in our society are big problems. The people in power right now have made it clear that they're not actually going to cause genuine change for us, so it's up to the people to get together and protest and create that change themselves.
Hi, I'm Billy Sims, and this is my piece, The Needle and the Damage Done, which is the name of a Neil Young song. And the song and also this piece are both about the opioid epidemic in this country. My art in general deals, it's all connected to narrative. And a lot of times I do larger bodies of work that are large form narratives. And then I sometimes have isolated pieces that really kind of tell a story on their own. And often my larger bodies of work incorporate a lot of written text. This is an exception to that. This piece is just sort of a standalone piece.
I'm Michael Skaggs, and my image is the Underground Railroad Museum, the Rankin House. Imagine escaping from slavery from 1830 to 1865, just after the Civil War, and over 2,000 plus slaves escaped from Kentucky, my home state, to the Rankin House in Ripley, Ohio. Well, I've been unlearning racism, sexism, homophobia since I was a child, growing up in Maysville. It's cultural, there's no vaccination, you have to admit it, and then you have to do something about it. I teach at Northern Kentucky University, and I have found that the best way that I can get people to have sensitivity or build some empathy is through art.
I am Tina Tamaro, and the piece is called We Were Never Children Like Your Children. I went to the Freedom Center many years ago, and they had a postcard show about lynchings. This is actually directly from the postcard, and it's men that I believe brought their children to witness the lynching. And I think it's based on their fear, that mob mentality, and the fear, of course, that they're going to make in the community by presenting this publicly. I think this whole idea of fear is so pervasive in our society. As I did it though, I wanted this figure to not just be a lynched figure, but also to be an ascendant figure as well. In this and in all my work is really about freedom, about families, about relationships, and how they shape our lives.
The name of my piece is De Tenida, and it is an assembled Chincolet collograph with stitching. I did this piece in response to the situation at the wall and the children who've been disenfranchised, detained. The point I'm trying to make is the loss of spirit that these children are suffering, and will they ever be whole again? The piece shows a little girl behind a fence. The piece is imposed on top of her. The name of this assemblage is called Chain Gang. I was struck by a headline in the Cincinnati Enquirer, "Homicide Sets a Record." This was at the same time that the Over the Rhine project was blooming, flourishing, and there was a lot of emphasis on creating this wonderful uplifting space. And at the same time, there was not a lot of attention being paid to the underbelly of our city. I was down in the Over the Rhine area at a gallery and got caught in the middle of a crossfire shooting, and it made a strong enough impression on me that I felt I needed to do this piece.
This piece is postulation. It's my reaction to what I consider hypocrisy and organized religion and cults. This particular series was a series I did called People Who Are Not People. Took the bodies out of the figure and just left their costumes. So the viewer can come and look at these paintings. They'll put their own circumstances or the people they might know, and then they'll insert them in these situations. I've been making art my entire life. So I paint, I sculpt, I work in metal, wood, oil paint, watercolor, anything.
artwork in this show is the Liberty Bell. There are two main concerns that inspire me. We as Americans are currently alive to peacefully express our belief within boundary of the laws. The system will start cracking whenever we disregard it. The political interests of our present leader, as well as the ecosystem, instigate cracks among citizens of the nation. Those strike my heart to the core. That's why the Liberty Bell was created.
This is my piece in the SOS Art Retrospective. I was doing some online research of early 20th century music folios, and I kept finding these old sheet music covers with disparaging and racist themes, and I was frankly shocked at the number of them. So I started collecting them. I asked a friend of mine, another local artist, Asha White, for her input as someone who's wearing a different color of skin than my own, and finalized the piece. It kind of serves as a signpost in time and truly how far we've come as a nation, but also how far we need to go. My creative expression ranges from visual fine arts to graphic design to writing to music composition. I create because I need to.
My piece is right here. It's children caged. There were many images of what was happening at our southern border that were appalling to me for a number of reasons. But there was an image of a little girl, probably 18 months or 2 years old, and she had been taken from her father and was standing at the feet of a Border Patrol person and crying. Vocationally, I'm a board-certified psychiatric mental health nurse. I work with folks who have survived horrendous traumas. And I just burst into tears because I knew that this trauma was going to be with her for the rest of her life. So I've used art a lot in working with my clients, and I realize how helpful it is for people to be able to move beyond what they're experiencing at the moment. I realize that the art helps me heal from things also.
This piece is in response to the immigration policy set forth by the Trump administration in 2018. It's inkjet prints of photos of my family incorporating typography, and it's mounted on plywood. I've reflected on my own family history and immigration. Unless you are a Native American, your ancestors are from somewhere else. In my case, my family is German. We are not of color, never enslaved, although there were obstacles and resistance. We had it easy, considering. And consider the city of Cincinnati itself, specifically over the Rhine, where all these immigrants, German and American, first settled, how it has changed over the years. But it remains a city of immigrants. Why do I make art? I have identified as an artist my entire life. I think it is my way of processing and organizing life's experiences, complex situations, memories, and relationships. Lately, my work has been straddling graphic design and printmaking.
This is called Oblique Strategies for Peace and Justice, and it's a 2-volume set of cards that are based on the idea of a card deck that Brian Eno created in the 70s for overcoming artistic block. Say, okay, I'm kind of ready to make some art here, preferably something with a social justice angle to it. And perhaps I'm just sort of blocked. I might pull one of these cards and see it says piece is patriotic, kind of a push into create, impetus for social justice type art. In a way, my works of art tend to focus on mass media, propaganda, commercialization, consumerism. The work of art is a chance to hopefully create a difference, or at least start a conversation.